Hello everyone. So welcome to this panel that we will start by presentation from Jeremy Kessler, who is head of international at the CNC and for the first time at Les Arcs. Presentation on Aide au cinéma du monde and the recent modifications that were made, and I think more generally on co-production. So I let you speak, and then we will have, but I will introduce also a panel organized in collaboration with European Producers Club.
Merci, thank you very much, Jeremy. We are the two Jeremys. Maybe there are some other in the room. I don't know. Yeah. Oh yes, and Stripe and yeah, we are like twins in Les Arcs. So thank you very much. I would like to start by stating that it's very important for me, very significant to speak about co-production with friends here in Les Arcs, because CNC has been accompanying Les Arcs for a few years, and Les Arcs has managed to be a very important rendezvous on the European map of co-production. And it's one of the festivals when I talk with other CNC in Europe about what we could do together, when we could sign an agreement or start new things. One of the festivals that people have in mind, maybe for the ski, but also for the projects that started here, and the opportunities that they are willing to find. So, before I start with presenting this scheme, Aide au cinéma du monde, which you all know, but it's always good to come back to the basis, and it has changed a little bit the past year, a year ago. Before I start, I would like to state that the policy, the international policy we try to lead in France, and especially in the CNC, which, for those who don't know, is the French Film Agency and the part of the Ministry of Culture, because in France the CNC is both a film agency and the part of the Ministry of Culture in charge of cinema, which means in charge of negotiating the laws about cinema, TV, video games, and negotiating the European text. So I forgot the beginning of my sentence, but it was something about what is important for us in our international policy, and it is Europe. And it's not just a word, Europe. In France, it was once 40 years ago or 50. I'm not good in mathematics. De Gaulle said l'Europe, l'Europe, l'Europe. No, it was not very positive in his mind, but for us it's really a priority and really something that we try to foster. And why? Because we are entering a very sharp period of time, very crucial period of time, in which we sense that there are pressure all over the place, from everywhere, to maybe redesign at some point or rethink the model of encouraging production, encouraging independent production that has been built over the years by France and our European partners. And if we are where we are now, even with the difficulties we are going to talk about after, it's also because we have been able on the European level to unite, to think, to implement a system, an ecosystem, which is in favor of independent creation. And that is the second point: independent creation, freedom of creation, singular creation and singular voices. That is what we aim at developing in France, and we aim at developing in Europe, and that is why we are here. And it's a European priority to make it possible all over Europe to have local independent ways of creating, and to have possibilities, to foster possibilities for creators to make their own creations and to retain their IP. And this is a political priority that I want to stress, because I think we are going to need to be united about this, maintaining the possibility for European creators, European producers, European artists of creating what they want, without enterprises from other parts of the world deciding about everything. And that is also why we are so much in favor of co-production, because the European ecosystem model involves co-production, involves working together, and involves in cinema co-production as a way of securing a financing, but also a free creation. So I won't be too long about that. Now it's time to dig in the details of the Aide au Cinéma du Monde, but I just wanted to stress that it is why this scheme exists, and why we try to always develop independent production. So, L'aide au Cinéma du Monde, you all know about it. It's a selective scheme. Some would say too selective, but it stays one of the most important co-production schemes in the world in terms of budget, even though the selective rate is around 15%. But it comes with a success. It's like we say in French, la rançon du succès. And it's a co-production scheme, which means that it's not just a subsidy, just like an avance sur recette for all the movie makers in the world. It is a scheme geared towards co-producing with friends. And this has been reinforced very recently, because what this presentation will show is the new rules of the Aide au Cinéma du Monde. It was not a revolution, be reassured, but we strengthened the co-production part, which means that we made it more important to have organic co-production and not financial co-production in the selective scheme. And we also added new eligible expenses, but this is what I'm going to show. And this works very well. It's not always the case. So the Aide au Cinéma du Monde was launched in 2012, and it's managed by the CNC and by the Institut Français, which is the administration of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in charge of the broadcasting of the French culture around the world. So, and it has three objectives: encourage diversity of world cinema, foster co-production with friends, and promote emergence of new directors. This is not changed for those who know the scheme already. It's a selective support. There is a production support, also a post-production support for the films that have been rejected at the production level. The annual budget was 6 million euros, but it will be raised next year in order to finance better the projects that are submitted. And we, as the president of CNC has announced in a letter which was in the press, it will be around 7 million next year. There are 4 sessions a year, and the fund is compatible with other funds. Something that is kind of original in the world is that all countries are eligible. It's not a fund geared towards a specific region, like the Red Sea Film Fund, or it's really a universal co-production fund. There are not so many, I think, in the world, because there was at some point Taika, but we don't know exactly where it's at. And I think that the Uberbals Fund has specific countries, so this is so for Aide au Cinéma du Monde, any country is eligible. It's for long feature, for feature films, all genre, documentary, fiction, animation, and the obligation is for a co-production company abroad to be within a co-production contract with a French company. But, and the last part is important, it is there's a difference for films above 2.5 million euros and for films under 2.5 million euros, because for films above 2.5 million euros, they need to have l'agrément. They need to be official co-production, acknowledged as such by the CNC and by the other country. It's not the case for the films under 2.5 million euros. So for instance, with countries with which there is no co-production agreement, even countries with which there will never be any co-production agreement because they are enemies of cultural diversity, the films still can get the aide au cinéma du monde when they're under 2.5 million euros. I'm checking the time. Eligibility conditions, so it's the shooting language must be the official language in the country of the director or in the shooting country. This is to avoid to finance the films that are in English only for commercial reasons. And for production support, the application must be submitted before the shooting. So this was raised recently, and it's important to know that for French initiative projects with a high budget, the support may now be up to 500,000 euros. It was not the case before, and this is important for those French initiated projects because they can't get, if they are in a foreign language, the avance sur recette, which is the major French selective scheme. And now the aide au cinéma du monde is more or less an amount comparable to the avance sur recette. And the post-filming support was also raised a little bit. This is about the French public support, which is capped. It cannot be over 50% of the French financing part or 80% for many films that get aide au cinéma du monde due to the country they're from or due to their budget, etc. Yeah, and something I'm not sure it is in the presentation, but something new is that for the film above 2.5 million euros, they need to have what we call 20 points when they get the certification by the CNC, which means that the amount of the expenses in France must be substantial. And this is also a way of fostering organic co-production, even though it may be difficult in some cases, but it was also linked to an enrichment of the eligible expenses, because before, 1 year ago, for instance, the expenses linked to the travel of the film teams were not eligible, and they are now. So this is about the selection process. In France, in the CNC, for the selective schemes, it's always commissions of experts. There are 3 different commissions, one for the first and second features, one for the third features and the following, and one for the post-filming applications. And also now, this was also inspired by the famous avance sur recette. Now there are 2 stages when you apply. First stage, the project is read by readers, and it's like what we call the reading committees. And second stage, it's what we call the plenary session, when the project is submitted to the real jury of the scheme. And now the French producer has to have an oral examination. And in the oral examination, I mean, examination is not the real term, but it's an oral time, they can describe the co-production and tell the story of the project, of how they got involved, and why it is of great matter. This is about how to apply, and the fact that you need to apply online, and about the document that must be in French. The translation part being very important, because when the jury reads the project, they read it in French. So we put general recommendations, like about meet French co-producers in major co-production markets. Maybe we should add Les Arcs in the list. I'm sorry, Jeremy, it's not yet in it, but and development labs, producers network. This is something actually that this kind of advice would be more relevant if you ask the producers that will be in the panel just after me. And this is some key figures about Aide au Cinéma du Monde, the number of projects submitted, and the number by genre, and also the fact that the projects are really come from all the continents. And when you see the country that get the most applications, the most subsidies, you see that it's European countries like Italy, but also countries from Latin America like Brazil and Argentina. And this was in Cannes, so there was several films that got Aide au Cinéma du Monde in Cannes that were actually awarded prizes. All We Imagine as Light, Grand Tour from Portugal, or Motel Destino by Karim Aynouz, and The Seed of the Sacred Fig by Mohamed Rasoulov, which is the second major success of the history of Aide au Cinéma du Monde. Okay, and this is the one picture thanks to the imagination of all the movie makers that get the scheme. So if there are any questions, I think we have 3 minutes.
Is there any question? It was so clear that no question. You do have one.
What about TRIP? I saw very briefly mention about TRIP. Is there any compatibility or not at all with TRIP situation? Because minority co-producers were not allowed, right, to get TRIP?
TRIP being C2I? Le crédit d'impôt national.
Crédit d'impôt international.
Ah oui, le crédit d'impôt international pour la production. Sorry for the French. Pour la production exécutive.
Oui.
Yeah. No, it's not compatible actually.
It's still not compatible,
because
right?
To get the international tax rebate, you need to have a French executive producer. I mean, with a producteur exécutif, line producer. And as well for the Aide au Cinéma du Monde, you really need to have a French producteur délégué.
Yes, it's just that it's, for many countries, the minority producer has access to these,
Actually,
tax rebates.
There are many.
I was just wondering.
It's true. There are many countries in which there is a tax rebate for minority co-productions, and for instance, it's the case in Canada. And it's always a discussion that we have with our friends from Quebec, because when a movie maker or producer from Canada does a minority co-production, they can get the tax rebate, and it's not the case for France. But the main issue is that we have every year to fight for the majority tax rebate, and keeping it in the French law is always a very hard fight. We succeeded in the past few years. So in the general context of the public finances, we will never succeed in having a minority co-production tax rebate, never.
Except if we get rid of the international tax rebate, which costs a lot of money.
Yes, but this wouldn't, I mean, what do you mean?
Well, the international tax rebate is in competition with all the international tax rebate of the entire world, where you have people from mainly Hollywood seeking for the best way to do stuff, and they go everywhere, destroying the industry wherever they go. And it's much more creative to do our real co-production, where we have a creative input, and we're making film as co-producer, as service production, where suddenly the cost inflates, and the result for the industry is not so great, because they come, they say, oh, we need all these studios. You build studios, then they're empty. And they do this everywhere. And I think we could save so much money by transferring that money to us. Would be fantastic. Sorry for that, but that's my...
Yeah, actually, as now there is only 40 seconds left, I couldn't... I couldn't really explain why I disagree with the first point, because I think that there is... I mean, it's part of the ecosystem also to have these international shootings come to France, while if they don't, they come elsewhere, and it's also allows a part of the industry to get some money and to be stronger for financing other projects. And there was, for instance, examples of companies that started dividing their work between international projects that are really rewarding in terms of financing and their own projects. So probably the two go together. But it would be, if it was that easy to suppress a tax to create another, maybe we could consider it. But trust me, I know how government works. And if we tell them that we suppress a tax rebate, the money won't go back in another one. It will go to the public hospitals, which may be good, but not to that.
Any other question? We can move on to the... Okay. So thank you. Thanks a lot, Jeremy.
Thank you.
And sorry to put pressure on timing that you respected. So the panel, thank you. So Pandora, I'm not good at pronunciation, sorry. Maybe you will tell it.
So hello, I'm Pandora Lecunha-Teles, and I'm from the European Producers Club, and we did this fantastic joint venture for this panel.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. So Pandora, I will let you introduce. It's a long partnership we have with our European Producers Club. We organize a panel every year together. We have a delegation of producers also. And I think we have an interesting theme this year on creative producers. And I will let you introduce you both the theme and the panelists.
Yes. So I'll ask you for joining me, Didar Domehri, and from Maneki Films, and Guntis Trekteris from Ego Media, and Emilie Georges from Paradise City, and Grimar Jonsson from Netop Films. The idea of this panel is to speak about a little bit about co-producing, but also about how is this about being creative producers in co-productions. And but first, maybe we'll divide this panel in two. And first, we'll speak about how it is to lead and to be in the driver's seat when you're doing a co-production as a creative producer, and then when you go to the back seat as a minority co-producer, and how things can change when money gets into the car and you change seat in the car. So maybe I would launch, the first idea is for you first to let yourself, I already say it, who you are, but first I would love to know is you as creative producers, now, what do you consider yourselves as creative producers is as a part of development? Like, how long do you take for develop a project? And how do you get inspired to do so? And what is the creative part of it? Maybe you could start and give us an idea of how you do it in Iceland.
Sure. Yeah, it takes me on average 5 years to do a film, and I usually work with the same directors again and again. I like long-term relationships, so I have really close relationship with my directors, and this I value very much. It's a long journey, spending 5 years of your life for a single project. So I think it's extremely important, you know, the personal relationships, and also this fact that, you know, it takes a couple of years to develop from a synopsis to a treatment to a script, etc. So and you hardly get any support for that up in Iceland. We get some script development, script grants, and that's about it. So I need to be extremely careful about the projects I choose and figure out ways to survive those years during the development, because I also believe in it's important to involve more people than just the director at that stage. So I try to early stage. I try to involve like production designers, even composers. You know, to bring people in early, because I think there comes a lot of hidden value in that. To bring them in early, it also makes a lot of sense in terms of building up a budget that makes sense, to have like a clear vision creatively for how we want to execute. So yeah, that's kind of how I work as a delegate producer. Yeah.
And do you have like a sky on your companies, like to say that you have a certain amount of money that you spend in terms of developing costs or seed costs for projects that you are developing, or you just follow your gut feeling and you forget that you have a calculator in your brain as well?
Yes, definitely a ceiling. Unfortunately, would love to have no ceiling for developing, but in our case, so I have a production company out of France, and one I'm working also in the UK, production company in the UK, together with Naima Abed, and we established a fund for development that is 250K, and it's basically a rolling fund, meaning if a development is not pursued or if it takes 5 years, which is very common, then it's locked for this much period of time. And as we do projects from all over the world, French is a paradise for French film in terms of development, but for non-French speaking movies, it's just like any other country of the world, meaning it's our own money. It's difficult, it's hard to finance, so we need partners and all of that.
Didar, how long did it take, the project that you took longer to develop? Yeah. How long was it?
The longest that I had? 10. There's one film that took me 10 years. Yeah. That was the longest, I think. Yeah.
And did you want it to get out in the middle?
Actually, yeah, we considered many times. Shall we stop it? But we really wanted to make it happen. And we knew that it's going to be very challenging. It was like a 15 million euros budget film with baby lion in the real life, modelized lions, and so that was quite a big, ambitious film. It took us really 10 years to find the right writers, the right director, the right partners, and then COVID happened. But we eventually made it, yeah. But yeah, it could really take time. And as Emilie was saying also, this is always the how much you can develop, because developing, it's a very risky part of our jobs. But this is key. We should develop as much as we can to be able to still be independent producer and producing, you know, the new voices that we are all looking for. And these are the most risky ones. It takes time, it takes money. And as you were saying, it's really good to have also already other head of departments involved in the process. That's very, very rich. And in France, we're quite lucky because we have the CNC. Thank you, Jeremy. Is he still here? The CNC is really helping us because we have a lot of sources of financing for development that other countries don't have. So one thing, we also have our fonds de soutien that is generated by our previous films that have been released in theaters that we can reinvest in the development phase. We have also Sofica money that is very specific to the French financing that we could take for our development phase as a lineup. We can also have partners as distributors and sales agents being really involved in the development phase. If it's a real big talent, they really want to be, you know, involved at the early stage. So that happens also. Sometimes I do that. And also wanted to mention that it's become more and more challenging to be ambitious as independent producer in this world where there's so many bigger companies, you know, joining forces. So we recently joined forces with 8 other female producers. One of them is in the room, Caroline Bonmarchand, that did the first panel before. And we created a collective called Athena, when we raised together money for development to enable ourselves to be more ambitious and to develop more. And we have a very specific clause of solidarity between us. And so we are backing up each other to a certain level during this development phase. So I think that we're also trying to really think out of the box to see how much we can develop, how far we can develop, how much it costs. It's a very, important question. Sorry, I was very long.
Oh, yeah. And you come from Guntis, you come from Latvia, so it's the one of, in terms of size, the smallest country in the panel. So how do you do it?
Well, it's different approach. I mean, my longest development was it was animated documentary. So we developed it for 5 years and produced for 3 or 4 years more. I mean, in a way, we also developed ourselves because it was something we were doing for the first time. But the good thing that we had Norwegian partners, and they have a very nice scheme. And then in the beginning, they support script, and then there is development stage 1, development stage 2. So we could combine it with Latvian funds, and that's how we, kind of succeeded. And I mean, it's different ways. Sometimes you just, when the money is over, you do it without money.
So lots of times. So yes. You co-developed that project with Norway.
Yes, yeah.
And how was the experience of starting from day one in co-development, in a co-production?
Well, actually, it was a very nice experience because we have been working with a director before on 3 documentaries. We have been working with a company on 2 or 3 documentary co-productions. So it was kind of really a trust and kind of, I mean, it wasn't easy because it was slow, but there were no problems kind of between us.
But then when we look for co-productions, sometimes it's because we need more money on this car that is rolling, and when you are leading and you have all this development, sometimes money gets in, and the money is more than you put in. So sometimes rules changes, and it would be great the audience for you to share a little bit what happened when those rules change. If ever you passed from majority delegate producer to minority, and if no, because it's interesting because sometimes you can change and you don't control the car anymore, and you want control, and the director has confidence on you and not on somebody else, but then things change. So what do you do when that happens?
Talking to me?
Yeah. I was looking at you. Yeah, but it can be, but it will be to everybody.
Yeah, I think that it's good also to say that there's so many different ways of co-producing with other countries. We can, as you say, we can co-develop, and we can co-develop and then decide that we are co-producing as co-delegate producers from one country to another on a 50-50 basis, or we can say, I have developed it for many years, like I spent 5 years of my time and my money and my talent developing this project, and then I bring it to the world and I find organic co-producers or financial co-producers. Sometimes I could be the smaller country and they can bring much more money than I can in my country. I'm not saying France, it's not a good example, but in other lower capacity countries, it could be the case. So is it really fair that we just take the rules of our bilateral or multilateral convention and say that we are sharing pro rata based on what everyone is bringing. The question that we're really trying to ask ourselves is, what is the value of all this time that we are spending as delegate producers of developing a project with our talents and then we sharing it with others? What are the rules that we can talk together, or ideas that we can find, or just give the examples of what we did in the past to unbalance what could be sometimes considered as asymmetrical co-production because of the value of money in one country to another, the cost of filming in a country to another, and when you compare, sometimes it's double or triple times more. So that's what we wanted to share with you.
But we all have this difference. We all know that there's different social security schemes and MGs because of the size of the markets. But how can we besides the difference that are huge, what would be ideas to overcome this? So if you feel like, Guntis, that you have put a lot of effort on a co-production in terms of even minority co-production, a lot of time, how do you put that time, a value on that time? In development or in post-production, how do you value that?
Well, it's I mean, the only way you can do it, you can negotiate it. I mean, with your partners, with your co-producers, or with the main producer, if you're not the main. What we sometimes do is or at least recently, maybe we kind of ask for some more territories to be on our share, maybe some Baltic states, though there is not a big markets. I mean, if you compare it to Latvia, same size. So I mean, yeah, it's yeah, maybe sometimes you can negotiate that your involvement was bigger, so you can ask for bigger share. I don't know. It's yeah, I think it's about the trust, because I guess in the moment when you invest and you get involved more, I think there is a trust also from your partners that they are willing to do it. So I think in a way I think they are ready that you probably get also more out of it at the end.
Yeah, and also it has to be quite clear of what everyone is expecting from each other. So it has to be very clear between co-producers that I have spent that much time on this project, so I should maybe recoup this money first. Then we can share the rest of the world, or we can share everything together in the same pot, or I should have my reserve territories maybe more than you guys because I deserve it. I spent 5 years and you didn't. You just like spent 6 months financing. It has to be clear for everybody, but I think that it's really you know, good faith negotiation between all of us. It has to be clear from the beginning so we can find the right solution also.
Yes. What we try to do, I mean, we've experimented many options, right? The first one on the development stage is to differentiate the money that you get from funds that doesn't generate a premium and gets everyone, you know, covered. But the money at risk, the money the companies are investing in a co-development, gets access to a premium. And that's what we try to do in co-development process. You know, whenever someone is at risk, then it creates an opportunity for them when the film gets financed to have access to a premium. So that's number one. Another option is, and I can give examples.
Yeah,
but
that should be great.
Yeah.
Visualize.
But that's one thing, and also in the Anglo-Saxon and rest of the world financing, development producers get access to backend, a certain percentage. For instance, in the US, you're guaranteed to have 2.5% of backend if you have been the development producer. Knowing that the backend is not structured the way a European co-production is, so it's all up for discussion between the co-producers. But that's also something that can give a bonus, in a way, for the lead producer that has spent so much time developing. Another way that we've seen recently is to give a salary for the development producer that is paid out of the contingencies if you have unspent contingencies. And it's also up for discussion between co-producers, but that can be something like, you know, depending on how long and how big the project is, from 5K to 15, something like this. That's also something that I've seen in movies, and that was accepted, you know, by the partners as a fair option. But I have also been in this situation where, as soon as I share, you know, this discussion, I've been kicked out of the co-production. So
So you didn't change seat in the car. They just opened the door and they kick you out.
Yes.
Okay.
when you're the rules, you know, the old-fashioned financing that is written in the European Eurimage Convention is definitely a bit old-fashioned, so you have to find ways. Same for creating unfairness by giving, you know, big territories as reserved territory for the co-producer is something that I've always seen very unfair. I will always remember this situation for an Italian movie called Graziella's Island from Emanuele Crialese, long time ago. The Italian producer was, I think, almost not paid during the shoot. The French producer gets the reserve territory of France. The Italian producer gets the reserve territory of Italy. The movie has made, I don't even remember, but 800,000 admissions out of France, while it did 20K in Italy. So the benefits from the 800,000 admissions was going only for the French minority co-producer. And I think, you know, this example always struck me as, wow, you cannot accept, you know, this type of situation. It's so unfair. So
more and more, I think that some countries are also asking to the bigger territories, especially if they're minority, to share their territory. And so to put it in the same pot and to share everything.
And how do you feel when you're co-producing? Sometimes does it get mixed when people like look for you to do co-production? Do sometimes people just go to Iceland and say, I want to shoot here, and forget what's the difference between a co-producer and an executive producer?
Absolutely. Iceland is huge on the servicing side. It's quite popular as for locations and rather big, both US and European productions. And obviously there's a huge difference between servicing a project or being a real minority co-producer. So like in my mind, like if I go into a minor co-production, there has to be like a creative angle that makes sense for me as a minor co-producer, and it has to make sense in that sense that I can go and seek funding as a minor co-producer, and to be able to do that, there has to be some real artistic values coming out from Iceland. A composer or an editor or some of those key artistic positions need to be Icelandic, and the spend needs to be reasonable. So then we can benefit both from getting a minor support from the film fund, but also also getting the high tax reimbursement. But so it has to make sense artistically for us to minor co-produce in that way. There are other good companies that specialize in servicing, but that's a whole different industry, so to speak.
And with who do you co-produce that you feel that you had like a very good case example that really went well?
I was really happy with my last minor co-production, a Danish film called The Eternal, where we both had shooting days, we had cast, we had the composer, and we had visual effects. So we were, you know, the total spend in Iceland was almost €1 million. So it really made sense, and we got support from the film fund, and we got the tax incentives, etc. So it was a big Icelandic impact on the production, like both on the financial side, but also artistically.
Yeah, I think that the best co-productions are the ones that are really organic.
Yeah.
When you're really looking for a partner that can offer things you don't have, or talents that your director is willing to work with.
Exactly, it has to make sense and evaluate the project, and
Exactly.
you know, that makes us make the our decision making easier, because
I really also try to involve the talent in those dialogues we have with our co-producers, because when you impose them at the end, all the regulations, of course we're looking for money, we try to make it work, but it's so much easier and better when the talent agrees or wants to have someone else from another country, and then you make the whole financing works afterwards.
exactly.
Yeah.
And when you mean talent, you mean the script writers and the director?
The director.
The director only, okay.
To choose the head of departments,
Right.
you know, and he's artistic, you know, head of departments that he's really willing. Example, Motel Destino that he mentioned, Jeremy, that we had Cinéma du Monde. It's a director, Karim Menous, who's based in Berlin. He's Brazilian, French, and he shot the film in Brazil entirely, but the editor was French, the DOP was French, the composer was French, and we did part of the lab in France. And that were, you know, really decisions he took because he wanted to work with these people. So for us, it was much easier, of course. We didn't have to fight artificially and imposing, you know, spending in our country.
I can also give the example of Call Me By Your Name that I produced. It's in a way, you know, one of these situations where, you know, I came on board with Luca Guadagnino pitching me the movie, and we decided to completely embrace a chain of title that had a long history. He was not willing to take the lead, you know, on all the rights and negotiation and all. So we were the one owning the chain of title, clearing all the rights, and artificially we created, at the end of the day, a minority French co-production because the tax rebate in Italy was better than the French one. So technically, we appear as a 20% minority co-producer, and Italy 80%, while we were the one completely leading all the risk, financial risks, all the legal risks that were definitely, significant on this movie. So that's part of the ego for a lead producer sometimes, that you have to completely let go if you want the movie to happen. Yeah.
And would you say that time that you spend on a film and then when you change seat, how do you get it back? Not only in terms of percentage, because you have you define, but it has an impact also in terms of your names and your company names on the poster, on going up on the festivals, on presenting. How do you manage this? Because it's not just about the percentage and the quantity of money and territories, but also in terms of exposure. So how do you manage that?
I think also it's a question of time, but also it's a question of responsibility. Like, who is responsible for what? And when shit happens, who covers for it? Who pays for it?
Yeah.
That's one of the first questions we should ask ourselves when we do partnership co-productions. And also, of course, responsibility come with the stress and the mental charge that you have on this project. And as a financial minority co-producer, if that's the case, of course your time has nothing to do with the one who is the delegate producer and who has all the mental charge and the stress of the film, and of course the responsibility, the financial, responsibility of the film. But it's not always, like that. It could be totally divided between partners because it has been decided and designed that way from the co-development stage, or it could change also. One of the partner can disappear in the middle of the way and someone else can take over. So I think that as producers, we really need to be flexible. But we have to be very clear on the rules that are the national and international rules we're playing with all the time, but also the rules that we are basically deciding to apply to ourselves and in good faith, and also what is fair to us, because we know as producers our job is very, very tough. And the time we're spending on our project is, I don't know, it's timeless. It takes so much time that we need to value it. We know so much each other. We suffer so much on this project. It needs to have a value, but it has to be clear between us.
I can give another example. We've been developing with a Hungarian director, Lilia Horváth, a movie for 4 years now, and many incarnation. It's an English speaking, so France is not the paradise of English speaking, right? So she got money from Hungary for the development, which was amazing. And she has her own production company, so very protected artistically. And that was great. We worked with her along the way. But at the end of the day, when the financing structure was, when it was time to get the film financed, France was not responsive to the project, so we had to bring on board other partners to get the movie financed. And we found, Complete Sun in Germany, Amorfo in Austria, and she found Miro in Croatia and Bosnia and Romania and many others. And we are basically at the end of the financing of this movie, but us, who have been involved since the beginning, the only way we found, which is close to what the American way would do, is we stayed on board as delegate producer. So we will have our names as delegate producer in the movie, but that was, it's completely dependent on the talent's will, right? We are going to have these credits at the end and get paid for the work we've done. We have a tiny share in the back end as well, but that's something up for discussion. And we resolve, the situation in a very fair, I think, environment. So that's also a good example of something that can,
So I'm listening to you, and it looks like paradise, no? So
with us, yes.
No.
Companies called Paradise
like
City. Yeah.
It looks like paradise. So, but there are tons of examples that things don't go as well. But do you feel that it's best to talk these things all personally, or less emails possible? Or the contrary, do emails, because we've all had problems in co-productions that went to court and never got solved.
Yeah.
You know? I have a very good example. I did the man who killed Don Quixote, so a very good example on that. So, but how do you do it? It's a trust in the partner. It's very good contracts. It's being in the same room and discussing this. What are your core rules to make these co-productions work independently if you are majority or minority?
Yeah, all that you said.
Yeah.
All that.
Okay.
Exactly.
That would be
All.
That would be the ideal. But I think that first of all, what is the philosophy of the co-production? Really, what are we looking for? What is the film we want to do? Are we artistically aligned? First of all, are we really passionate by the project and the talent we're defending and championing together? First of all, or are we only doing it for financial reasons? It can also happen. There are producers that way. You know, it has to be clear who's doing it for what reason, and then you decide of the rules that we can play with in our respective countries, and also what are the rules between us because of the time that we have spent, that what we explained earlier, and we carefully draft a contract that says everything we said in it, because when shit happens again, then we go back and look at the contracts. Oh, we said that. Oh, really? You know, sometimes we can change it again, but I think the more precise we are on how we can work between us, the easier it gets afterwards. But
more precise and also the more transparent everything is. That creates the trust between the people, and so for me personally, that's the most important thing, to be extremely transparent, both when it comes to budget, but also the financing and the contracts, etc. So I truly believe that you know, full transparency is the key to successful co-production.
And that's why when it works with a producer, with a co-producer, you really want to, you know, to repeat the experience. So having people that you trust all around the world, and you know, it's so much easier when you know the people, when you have been into the war together, because sometimes it really looks like you're in the war. And you came back safely, and you're still speaking to each other.
So when we went to war with that person, you want to continue to go to the war with that person.
If it went well, yes.
Ah.
If it went well.
But there is a little contradiction, because as I observed, that we all kind of agree that it's nice to work with the same partners and with same co-producers, with people you know. But then you kind of, with every next project or the film, you become less and less careful about legal stuff. You sometimes take the old contract, just change the name and some things like that. Yes, and I think that's where you should be kind of careful.
Evil is in the detail. Yeah.
I know, but it's very good advice.
Yeah, so but it's, I mean, I'm doing it, so it's kind of, I should go home and change this.
But that also requires legal skills, you know, in a way. So that's something quite difficult and not a given, because it's also a very high cost if you have to outsource everything in this type of negotiation.
And do you do, besides the contracts, like we are speaking now about contracts of co-production, but do you do like early stage contracts of co-production, like for saying just for the one page of the wheel of co-producing that project, and then more precise and longer form?
A deal memo.
Sure.
Huh?
Yeah, like
Deal memo of co-development.
like I
usually needed for funds.
Yeah, I usually have to work hard for getting the national base funding in place. I call it the golden key that enables me to go abroad and seek co-producers and ways to elevate the projects. And yeah, just a simple co-production deal memo is enough on the early stage, and that's not rocket science at all. It's super simple.
And it also allows to have a little time to see how it goes, how our talents are also reflecting on these co-production we're talking, how we can basically get more and more precise in the whole process. So we can give each other this time to be much more precise for a longer form, you know.
Yeah, just to give an example, this Hungarian project I was mentioning, on which we are not co-producers officially anymore, even if we're fully producer, personally, we signed at the beginning a co-development, co-delegate 50-50 agreement. So it has evolved along the route.
But do also you feel that there's the moment when you are a minority co-producer that it's not just about bringing money or some creative input, but sometimes you are a fireman, that when main producer and director and there's some trouble in the co-production, that sometimes minority co-producer can be a fireman, just arrive and put a little bit of water into the pan.
Yeah, it could be the case. I mean, sometimes maybe it could help the main producer that is having issues with the talent, also to help them to have, you know, someone that has not as much at stake and have a clear, vision, is not as possessed by the film as the main producer.
It can always be convenient to be, you know, the good cop and the bad cop.
Yeah,
Switch roles, like, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's.
But that's a trust relationship that
Exactly.
you need,
Yeah.
to play that.
In editing, it can work also.
Oh yes,
The editing phase.
And do you go to, like, to the other, do you receive the cuts in more by today? People tend not to travel and they receive the cuts by email, but do you still make an effort to go and see in real time with the director and the co-producers the cuts, to be able to speak more, to have the time, the quality time to do so?
Absolutely, yeah.
yes, but also getting green, a bit more green, right? Not traveling for any meeting.
No, there's certain milestones.
No,
when
there are
you know, when
milestones.
you're
So definitely depends on the, you know, if it's cut number 23 or not.
Maybe we would open up for some questions. You have this great panel here, so if you'd like to drop in some questions about co-productions, being creative, changing seats in the car,
Maybe different experiences.
different experiences, advices, something like that.
Yeah, maybe I'll try about something like that. You develop a movie and then you find more money abroad, or with co-producer, you become a minority in your own film. And the European regulation of the European Convention, the treaties, forces you to have a share proportional to the money that's been found somewhere else, which is absolutely not the case in the equity world. And the equity world considers that all this money comes from public subsidies, and it's just a lowering of risk. Well, actually, I figured that even if you respect this, in the waterfall you can make it completely different. And that's okay. And actually,
That's
even
okay.
her image recognize it properly. And I have a case like this where we found way more money abroad than in France. Even we developed the film in France. We were down to maybe 30% of the film, but we went back up to a reasonable amount. And even though the agreement and all the official documents were proportional to whatever it was, the actual waterfall was different in times of sharing the actual money. So you can really go and solve that kind of issues, which is so frustrating when you finally manage to make the film and you wind up having 20% in it somehow.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of
or
ways
zero.
to do it, which is completely legal and okay. I mean, it's still respect, because shares are, what is it, property, you know.
Yeah, so you have basically, as you said, the waterfall and how you recoup and you counterbalance when there is unequal, share because of that asymmetric co-production. You can add bonus for the main producer. You can add exclusive territories for the main producer, that the corridors, or you can have a bigger share of the profits, that you share everything all together. So yeah, I think there's really a lot of different ways to counterbalance when it's unequal.
And when you are developing, you can also put like a minimum in the contracts that's saying that you will never go under X amount, independently of the money that you bring to the table. No?
yeah, you can do that, but then if you're the majority producer, then the other has to accept. The one that you're inviting on the table, they have to accept that you will never be less than this percentage. Yeah.
Any other question?
Too technical.
It's too we're going too technical. I know. So
We killed everyone.
but maybe you could also, because we have still some 5 minutes left, maybe you could tell us, now that we spoke about all the good, maybe if there is some complicated film that you had that made yes, but made you wanna get out of the projects, and even you had already raised a lot of money to the project, and you had the creative input on the project, that you left the project.
This is when you're like, did I draft a close exit in my contract? And you're like, damn, I didn't. So I think that this is also something yet. You're right, we have to anticipate. What is the exit clause that we can draft? And again, what we could put in it. That you get reimbursed. When you get reimbursed, you have a bonus. How much is the bonus? The premium? Are you still keeping credits? Or are you totally getting out of it? All that you can also anticipate basically on the first date. I mean, anticipating the divorce on the first date sometimes seems a bit gross.
It's like a
it's a prenup.
It's
a prenup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I recently had a project that I've been developing for many years with a close friend and a director. And it was a big, ambitious project. So the budget was around 6 million euros. I managed to finance 4, which was not enough. So eventually we had to pull the plug and put it on ice. So it was the most difficult decision I ever made, but I still think today was the right decision, because
Maybe your company would have been shut down now.
Exactly. So rather pull the plug than doing a film that you can't afford, or doing or compromise. You can't compromise endlessly downwards. Like then you have a different product than you set up to produce. So
these are the most painful decision, and the hardest one, because as producers we're fighting like crazy to make it happen.
Yeah, and when you spend years on it, then you reach so far. So it's like I'm still a bit sad and frustrated, but I still think it was the right decision, and I might repay this project. It's on ice. I didn't kill it, but it's like it's tough, but. But you have to do it.
Yeah, it's so great you're talking about this, because a year ago I was also on a project when suddenly I felt that if we would go further, I would lose a lot, because I was not in trust with the director and the partners anymore, and I felt that was such a dangerous zone, that how passionate I was about the project and even the money that I had spent on it, I was ready to lose it, to not lose more. And these are really those very specific moments you feel very lonely. You feel very lonely because you're like, is it the right decision,
And you were the majority.
Yeah, and that's that's a tough decision to make.
So I hope we gave you some ideas and some clues that can help you on your next co-productions and on your creative path. And we are all free in the next couple of minutes if you want to talk a little bit further and enjoy the rest of Les Arcs and of the drinks after.
Merci to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.